All right, you were talking about scales.
Yeah. Just yesterday hearing John talk about what you were talking about and how that changed everything. When just
Well, every time I talk about scales, my first question is, what is music? It's language, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, you need to treat it like one. So, you know, I look at the notes as the alphabet and or vocabulary for the language of music. Notes are organized into scales for a lot the same reason that letters are organized into words, words into sentences, sentences into paragraphs. It's a way to organize the material to use it to communicate. So I look at scales as an organizational process for your notes. All right? Now, most people would say, okay, we're going to work on scales. First thing that comes to mind is something like this. Right? Has anybody ever heard anybody get on stage and do that? I know I have. Right? So spending a lot of time there probably, you know, isn't a good idea because you're simply just not going to use the thing that way. I mean, you know, for a hand exercise and listening what the scale sounds like in its basic form, sure, you know. But that's not the way you're going to actually use it, you know. So the idea of basically, technically speaking, is matching the right scale to the right chord. Because when you're playing a song, you know, you're going to have a chord that's being played. The notes you're going to use to outline that chord sound, whether it be a bass line or a solo, are going to come from the notes of the scale that go with that chord. Those notes are going to sound good, right? This is a major chord sound, really brief. Right? So if I play the notes of the A major scale, it's going to sound good, right? The idea is I need to know where all those notes are to the point where I'm not thinking about what I would play again any more than I think about each word as I would say it to you talking. Right? Now I'm not thinking about any of it. I'm just hearing and playing. But I was able to control the notes enough to where I was restricting my choices just to those notes. Now, maybe different versions of them, but it was just the notes of the scale, right? So that's the idea, is that you want to learn where all the notes of a scale are on the fingerboard, as opposed to just a couple ways of going up and down, so that, you know, you learn these well enough to where you just hear and your hands just simply know where to go. In the same way your mouth knows how to move when you talk. And when you think about the two languages, the spoken language is much more complex than the language of music. That's why you can always tell if you're talking to a computer on the telephone, because technology hasn't gotten to the point where they can reproduce all the inflections of human speech. It's getting close, but you know, hasn't got, you know, you can always kind of tell. There's a lot more going on. So it's not, there's a lot of information to learn, but if you look at it like learning a language, it really kind of simplifies things, and it makes the understanding of why to work on a lot of the tedious stuff a little bit more, you know, easier to take. Because some of it's sitting down, you know, just, it's not real exciting stuff to work on. But if you want to get good, you got to do it. Some musical terms to understand. Intervals. Everybody know the definition of that word.
space between notes.
Distance between two notes, right? You know, from da-da, that's an interval. You know, from there to there, it's just a distance in sound, right? Like the smallest interval in Western music, next biggest distance, right. Most scales are comprised of different combinations of whole step and half step intervals. It always must stay the same for the scale to be what it is. So it's really about a distance relationship from one to all the other notes of the scale. That's what makes it what it is. So these circle notes are the A major scale because A, we call A1, and then the second note, which happens to be B. B is really not important here. It just happened to be at the right place at the right time, right? But what's important is that's 2. 2 is always a whole step up from 1. You cannot call it 2 unless it has that relationship to 1. And then 3 is a whole step up from 2. 4 is a half step up from 3. 5 is a whole step up from 4. 6 is a whole step up from 5. 7 is a whole step up from 6. And 1 is, again, a half step up from 7. A major scale can only exist like that. So that's what makes it the major scales, because we call A1, and then the rest of the notes fall in that distance formula. And all scales are defined by this relationship. You establish one, then you look at the relationship distances, and that's how you know what it is. And it's important to know what it is because, you know, when you're playing over chord progressions, you might have, you know, chords have function numbers too that define what they are. And you have, like, in the major scale modes, now I know I'm probably jumping real ahead, so if you don't get all what I'm saying here, don't worry about it. But basically, we have 3 minors that we could play in the key of A. We have 2 minor, B minor, right, C sharp, 3 minor, then F sharp minor, 6 minor. So if we're playing in the key of A, or if we're playing and we see like a C sharp minor, we can't just play the normal scale that everybody probably comfortable with the Dorian mode over that 3 minor. It's not going to sound right. So you have to be able to identify the chord, then know which scale that goes with it. And so by learning this number system is a way you make these identifications and pick the right choice. All right? So how do we learn where all the notes are? Well, what we do is we break them down into 3 circled notes per string, with each circle note on your lowest string starting its own scale pattern, or what I call box of notes. All right, so if I take out everything but the first three circled notes per string, this isn't easy to do, by the way, sorry. I got that, right? I would call that the 5 or the E box or the 5 box, because the note function formula of that, if A is 1 and I go up 5 notes with that formula that I was talking about, the whole step, half step, whole step, I'm going to end up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. E is 5. So because of its note function number, I name it the 5 box. And the cool thing about the numbers is that that shape is always going to be the 5 box, no matter what key it is. So identifying it with numbers turns the 12 keys into one thing. Simplifies it tremendously. Anyway, see, I'm skipping a lot of stuff here. It's a lot more detailed, so I'm kind of jumping through a lot of stuff. So raise your hand if it gets to be to where you're not getting what I'm talking about here, okay? All right, so if I go up to the next 3 circled notes per string, got those. All right, so that note, this box starting on F sharp, which is a 6, is always going to be next to that 5 box. The next 3 circle notes up there. And so it's associative learning. If we know this shape is here, this shape's next to that one, this shape's next to that one. We have 7 different shapes corresponding with the 7 different notes of the scale. And these shapes are the same in every key. They may be in a different place on the neck, but the shapes are the same, and the relationship of one shape to the others are the same. All right, any questions so far?
I got this. I worked on this for years.
But to clarify, so you have your, say you're an A major,
right,
and you have your shape, and you find your A, and then it's that shape.
Mm-hmm.
You say if you're going to be in G major, you just find your G, and it's the same shape.
Yes. For example, let's say if I was doing what I would call the 7 box here, right? 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So I get that one. Okay, well that's A. Well, I know this one's next to that one, that one's next to that one, that one's next to that one. All of a sudden my neck opens up. I know where everything is.
Yeah.
Right? So pick a key.
C major.
C. Right? Well, I know that that box started on 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's my C there. 7's always a half step below 1. Right? So 7 box, 1, 2, 3, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I just did that same shape, but I started in relationship to C now. Well, if that's 7 box, I know the 1 box is here. Well, if that's a 1 box, the 2 box is here. Well, 3 boxes here. 4, 5, 6, back to 7 again. Also, I got the whole neck.
Hey Russ, can you incorporate the correct fingering as you're doing this, or is that getting too complicated?
Well, no. Well, actually, see, this isn't how you learn them. You know, if you were taking lessons from me, I would show you how it works here on the fingerboard so that you get a visual perspective of how they relate on the fingerboard. But when you actually work on them, we go these slides here. You see why I don't print this stuff out, John, because the major scale alone, 4-string version is 40 pages long.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
But see, it used to be just 3 for the major scale, because, you know, I mean, if I gave you the entire scales package, it'd stand 15 feet tall. I mean, that's the beauty of PDF files,
Yeah,
you know. You
my
can
stack's about like that.
multiply that by about
You
30.
just have to work on it every day and make it become brand, where you don't have to think about it. That's it, to work on it.
All right, so what I've done is that I break them up. The boxes, what you actually start working on is this. I break up the boxes individually. And you have your fret numbers down at the bottom to see where you are to orient yourself on the fingerboard, right? So then you're talking about the fingering.
Yeah.
So I have the note name version, so you can kind of correlate that with what you were just looking at with the fingerboard part. And then I have the fingering inside the circles there. So the left-hand finger numbers. So it'd be open 2, 4, open 2, 4, open 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. For the 6 box, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4 stretch, 1, 2, 4 stretch. Now you also have an option of using 1, 2, 3 here, because if you're moving quickly, if you watch what the hand has to do to go from a 1, 3, 4 fingering to a 1, 2, 4 stretch fingering like that. See that movement? If I do a 1, 2, 3, I take that movement out, so you know, you can buzz through them quick. I couldn't move like that and go 1, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 4 stretch like that. It's just too much left hand movement. So you have some options depending on how fast you're playing. But anyway, you got the to answer your question, John, the fingering stuff is all in these little circles here. Then once you get the fingering down, you go to the next slide, and that has the note function numbers. And this is where the clock really starts ticking, because this is how you identify everything. So you call out these numbers: 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7. It's like knowing how a word is spelled, you know, but you're not thinking about it. But I bet you if I stopped you mid-sentence, you'd be able to tell me. You know it, right? But when I'm playing, I'm not thinking any of that stuff. I'm just hearing something playing. But if you stop me on a note, okay, well that's 6. You know, I can tell you what it is. Not that it really matters, but
It's kind of like jumping in the middle of the ABCs and saying them all the way around back to the A.
yeah. So anyway, that's how my scale system, that's what my scale system is based on. It's basically geography. You know, you learn where things are, and then you get into application, you know. And application is interesting in the sense that, you know, if you were to ask me, okay, what defines a good line musically, harmonically speaking, you know, a bass line or a solo, you know, what makes it work? Well, basically technically speaking, it comes down to your ability to control what note function numbers go where in the rhythm. Just like your words fall in a certain order to make sense when you talk to somebody. I mean, if you just spit out random words, it wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't hold somebody's attention very long, right? They have to fall in a certain order for the idea to get across. The way it works musically is what goes where rhythmically. And a basic example would be chord tones on downbeats. Right, so this is where the numbers come in, really knowing the note function numbers. If I just have a C7 chord going here, right? Now let's say the scale that goes with this is something called the C dominant 7 scale, right? Or C mixed Lydian, 5th Muslim major scale. Don't worry about it. But anyway, those sounds, right? Now if I go down that scale, it sounds okay, but it doesn't really work. Now, why doesn't it work? Well, the reason is because I'm putting the chord tones on the upbeats instead of the downbeats. Because if I'm doing 8th notes, they're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. The 1's on the downbeat. The flat 7 chord tones on the upbeat. The 6 scale tone is on the downbeat. 5 is on the upbeat, major chord tone. 4 is on the downbeat, probably the note that sounds the least good, right? 3 is on the upbeat. So all the notes that I want on the downbeats aren't there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So to solve that problem, I put a note in between the root and the flat 7 to force the chord tones on the downbeats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now listen to the difference in the line. Sounds a lot better as opposed to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it doesn't really work. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So that's why you learn the numbers is when you get into the application part of it. You know, you start working in basically mathematics, you know, and then you internalize that information where you just learn to hear these sounds, you know, and you just play by ear, you know. You end up getting there, but you're coming from a point of being educated in the grammar part of it so that, you know, it gives you more control over the manipulation. So I could say, okay, I'm going to go down 1, chromatic passing tone, flat 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, chromatic passing tone. And I'm going to go up an arpeggio on the flat 7, 9, 11, 13, resolving to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, chromatic passing tone, flat 7, 6, 5, 4, up on the 3, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, resolving to 1. All right, so I'm able to actually think through something to work on developing my ear to get these sounds together. So once you get the geography of this stuff down, then you get into this type of work to where you actually start working stuff out and, you know, creating lines that actually you deliberately plug in, because when people improvise, you're not really creating stuff that nobody's ever done before. That's not the way it works. It's like a language. In other words, how many times during the course of a day do you actually invent a new word that nobody's ever used before and start using it? Right? You know, languages don't work that way. What you do is you use the same words that everybody's used forever, right? But you say them always in a way that's uniquely you. So that when you start playing this stuff, you know, that was just me talking. But I was using stuff that, you know, that wasn't anything that nobody has never played before. But I put it together in a way that was just Russ talking, that's all. So it gets back to the language thing, that's all it is. I mean, conceptually it's so simple it's hard. So that's why people actually learn by ear, are actually coming from the right place. You know, because how do you learn a language? You know, when you're a kid, you listen, imitate, talk, right?
Not reading it in a book.
Right, you don't go, you know, like, that's why music's hard for a lot of people, I think, is because it's taught backwards. It's taught from the technical end first, you know. It's like explaining sentence structure to somebody who can't talk yet. It's not going to make sense because you have nothing to relate it to. So you learn how to play, then you study. But because of the educational system, because of what it is today, you know, we're almost kind of stuck with that technical thing first. So what I try to do in my stuff is I try to blend these two areas together. Get you playing, but at the same time, you know, yeah, well, this is called that, you know, and just kind of get these balanced and grow together.